Hello everyone and good morning, and thank you for coming today. My name is Marcelo Lu and I'm Chair of the Chemistry Industry Association of Canada and President of BASF Canada. With me is Bob Masterson, who is President and CEO of the association. We are here this morning to bring to attention an emerging issue that could cost jobs and greatly impact our economy. Chemistry in Canada is a $55 billion industry and represents over 600,000 direct and indirect jobs. As an industry, we believe climate change is an urgent issue that must be addressed. We believe that provincial climate change policies and federal carbon pricing backstop system get a number of things right. Carbon costs are transparent and predictable. There is an upper ceiling on costs faced by the industries and consumers of $50 a ton by 2022. Competitiveness considerations have been taken into account for trade-exposed industrial sectors, and industry and consumers are left to their own decision-making to determine how to minimize exposure to the carbon price signal. In the coming months, the Government of Canada will propose regulations for its next major climate change policy, a new clean fuel standard. As proposed, the federal clean fuel standard is an incredibly complex policy and goes far beyond typical mandates of ethanol in gasoline and will be the first in the world to include industrial gases and propane with a phased-in approach targeting liquid fuel in 2022.
Canada's chemistry industry consumes large quantities of very low carbon natural gas to run its operations. The greenhouse gases associated with that fuel are already priced through the provincial systems or the federal backstop. This clean fuel standard will duplicate those systems onto those same fuels. Moreover, the clean fuel standard will also apply to the low carbon energy sources that Canada's chemistry industry uses as feedstock to then turn into the 95% of all manufactured goods in the economy. Well, under the federal backstop and provincial systems, accommodation has been provided to industries unable to bear the full $50 carbon price signal in the global marketplace. No such accommodation is being proposed in the clean fuel standard for industry. And as a result, our industry could see a further $200 per ton or higher carbon price associated with the clean fuel standard. As a large energy consumer, this effectively doubles the cost of our low carbon natural gas. And you'll see those numbers in the background or we've circulated to you. Our industry exports the vast majority of our products, and the prices that we obtain for those are set on the world market. And thanks to Canada's abundance of low carbon feedstock, like our natural gas and natural gas liquids, we're able to produce these products with a much smaller carbon footprint compared to other jurisdictions that produce the same chemicals from coal or crude-based energy stocks and coal-based electricity systems. Whereas the government has made the potential for carbon leakage and competitiveness a core consideration in the design of the carbon pricing backstop, no such mechanism is proposed for the clean fuel standard. Failure to get the clean fuel standard right will harm both Canada's economy and increase greenhouse gases as production will leak to other jurisdictions. It's also important to note that British Columbia, California, and the European Union have each introduced their own clean fuel standards. However, these apply to a very narrow portion of transportation fuels and not to industrial consumption of fuels. Moreover, the British Columbia report reports that current CO2 avoidance costs average $165 a ton, while California reports average costs of $180 a ton Canadian. And so that provides some context for our estimates of the impact on our sector.
So in summary, we are supportive of our carbon pricing and believe that a transparent price signal can be an effective tool in reducing emissions when accompanied by measures that ensure the competitiveness of Canada's industrial sectors. We agree that the environment and the economy do not have to have competing priorities. It is vital that the Government of Canada supports Canada's chemistry sector through fostering those domestic investment to continue to reduce our carbon footprint and ensure that climate-friendly, made-in-Canada innovations and solutions continue to be found. So I thank you very much, and we look forward to taking some of your questions.
Mr. Masterson, I have several questions. What's the ethanol mandate in the clean fuel standard?
Well, it's a different instrument. So we currently have a federal methanol
5%?
ethanol standard of 5%. The clean fuel standard is a different instrument, and what's currently proposed for liquid fuels is a 10% improvement in carbon intensity beyond the existing 5% ethanol.
So I want to, because I'm not a chemist, are you saying they want to double the ethanol mandate?
No, there's no specific requirement for any solution, whether that be ethanol or biodiesel, etc. The point is a 10% improvement in the carbon intensity of fuels, and figure out how to achieve that.
Well, that's some question, though. How is that achievable?
If you care, you could look at the specifics of what's happened in California and British Columbia, and there's been a range of basically, if you produce fuels and you want to put them into the market, they have to reach that intensity. If you can't do it, you're in deficit. You go and achieve carbon intensity credits to balance you out, and those credits can come from any range of activities, and the current average price for those credits in the California market is the equivalent of $185 a ton CO2 avoided. Could be ethanol, could be anaerobic digestion of methane from a sewage treatment plant, many different things.
But does all this technology even exist? For instance, aviation fuel, the industry will say that we can't buy biofuel for aircraft. It's never been proven to be practical. You couldn't get it if you wanted it.
I can't comment on the aircraft, air transportation sector.
For your members, does this technology exist? Is it commercially available?
There are many different ways to generate alternative renewable fuels, and they all come with a price. And our concern is that the price that we analyze for this instrument will make our industry uncompetitive in Canada, and none of the same features are promoted with the Clean Fuel Standard that have been promoted with the federal backstop or the provincial systems that are in place.
Mr. Masterson, this is from stakeholder consultations, I'm assuming, with Environment Canada, is that correct?
They published a background paper a year and a half ago, and they're proposing regulations this June.
But your information is from ongoing consultation. Was it with the Department of the Environment?
Yes.
Okay. And they told you they're going to Gazette 2
no.
by June?
Gazette 1 this June, and Gazette 2 will be next summer.
Gazette 2 by the summer of 2020 with an enforcement period of when?
It begins in 2022.
2022 enforcement. Okay. So you've done your calculation on costs. You're aware the Chamber of Commerce has, their chief economist published a report about 6 weeks ago, said the carbon tax with the layover of the Clean Fuel Standard blows anyone's rebate that they receive this year. Have you worked out your calculation down to that granular level?
Well, we haven't looked at the impact on individual consumers and homeowners. What we would note is, I would think most homeowners and consumers would have the same concerns that we do, which is you have provincial systems and a federal backstop that provide some accommodation. If you're a consumer or homeowner, you have your carbon rebate under the current federal pricing system. There's no such accommodation for consumers and homeowners under the proposed Clean Fuel Standard. All the costs would be borne by those that consume the fuel.
And so for your members, or for John Q. citizen, at $200 a ton equivalent, that includes the carbon tax?
It does.
So you're talking about the equivalent of almost 50 cents a liter at the retail level for gasoline.
Roughly in California and British Columbia, estimates would be the current Clean Fuel Standard is 11 to 15 cents additional on the current price of gasoline. Again, we're looking at our main concern here beyond transportation fuels is the application to gaseous fuels, including natural gas, and you're talking about a different impact on our industry when you're talking about natural gas.
Sure, but even if it's natural gas, so on the carbon levy, I'm trying to remember the figures, 2022, the carbon tax is what, 10 cents per cubic meter?
I'm not sure.
Approximately 10 cents per cubic meter.
Yeah.
So I'm multiplying that, I'm quadrupling that to 40 cents a cubic meter. Well, that's an economy that grinds to a halt. Who's going to pay that?
I think there's someone else you should probably direct that question to.
Well, I take your point. I understand why you're upset. Is there any, do you draw any positive element from the fact that this will be at least gazetted before the election so that everyone can get excited?
Well, it's not our job to make people excited. It's our job to look at the policies that have been put before us and to provide our critique on the impact those will have. And we take the government at its word, Minister McKenna and the Prime Minister, when they talk about having a balanced approach between the economy and the environment. There are some issues outstanding with the federal backstop as it applies to our sector, but by and large the message is we think that balance is there. We would wish to see the same balanced approach taken with the Clean Fuel Standard.
Has this had any impact on capital investment in your industry by any of your members? Have you heard anecdotally or in terms of actual data?
So I think the challenge in referring to some of your previous questions is the uncertainty that we have on the legislation itself or the regulation itself. At the moment, there are calculations that we have to do ourselves that is not transparent whether we are even doing it correctly, but with the lack of information that we currently hold, we're not able to make those calculations. So we make our own assumptions. If the government has different calculations, then then it would be great to also understand and get transparency out of that. With the carbon tax, we did get a lot of transparency and a lot of measures that would address competitiveness. So to your point on investment, this is not a regulation that is currently in force. It is, as you mentioned, going to be gazetted this year, first one, and then the second one next year, and it will only come into force in 2022. As this becomes part of the regulatory environment that new investments will have to consider, for sure, that will be taken into account into investment decisions, and we know that is a cost that a lot of the sector has fine margins. And if we are increasing the costs, that is going to drive some decisions away from Canada.
If I may just follow up on that briefly, I think we've heard from Minister Marneau and his advisory council that Canada does have a problem with foreign direct investment. And our simple message is, as currently constructed, this is not going to help that situation. It is one more reason to not invest in Canada. And we think the policy can be addressed, it can be fixed. There are measures that have been put in place for the backstop. The same competitiveness considerations need to be brought to this instrument as well.
But even if they're, and I know time is short, and I don't mean this to be a conversation. Even if there are concessions on the backstop, that's just someone else's cost, right? There's no magic here. Even if there are exemptions for large emitters or whatever, someone's going to have to pay that 40 cents more a cubic meter. I mean, is that acknowledged? I mean,
I wouldn't agree with your premise. The federal backstop applies to 20% of our emissions, not the full 100%. No one else is picking up that price. It's just not applied into the economy because the economy could not sustain it and maintain output from our operations or that of other sectors. And I think that's a key point. A climate change policy that results in investment and carbon leakage to other jurisdictions, especially jurisdictions with higher carbon outputs, is a failed climate policy. We need a policy that retains economic activity, attracts investment in Canada, and lets us reduce emissions here at home.
Well, let me try it this way. This is my last question. The whole point is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by about 215 million tons a year. They start reviewing the carbon tax levy next year. Today, they say, they're 36% short. Well, anyone can do arithmetic. There's only one way those rates are going up, right? Is that acknowledged? That there's some essential flaws in this, whether it's your members or it's grandma with heating her home with natural gas, someone's going to get the stick under this plan if they plan to meet the target, which we were led to believe was the whole point of all this anyway. Comment?
Yeah, I mean, again, carbon pricing in general is a tool to get to these goals, but it should not be the only tool. And I think here is a holistic approach is maybe what is not missing, but to this exact topic that we're discussing today, Clean Fuel Standard, is where we see some gaps where I think needs to be addressed, like the carbon tax. Yeah, I think the carbon tax comes with a bunch of measures that allow you to have some certainty of investment. We know what the cost is going to be. We know whether there's going to be a ceiling. It is transparent. We are able to plan for this. We are able to consider this in the investments. At the moment, with the clean fuel standard, that is not the case. And to your point, I mean, now it's up to us to make a lot of these calculations and make these decisions that the government would like to meet the goals, the climate change goals. I think our industry has repeatedly mentioned that we are completely for this, but it needs to be a dialogue where we can do this together and not with a lot of uncertainty being created on the sector itself, which this at the moment is where we are and where we are worried as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it.
No more questions? No? Thank you.
That's it.
Good morning, Will.
Okay. Oh, you got it.